This is the story of a day where there was all this blood. A man was walking around and blood started coming out of him everywhere. There was so much blood that it filled up an elevator. He went to the store, and there was just blood all over the place. People were slipping in it, and they were all grossed out. He tried to go swimming, and all the sharks went nuts and bitten everybody. He got chased by all the vampires ever. One time, the blood got a kid and a dog. At the end of the day, everyone decided that they would send him to space so that he would stop getting blood everywhere. The scariest part is that that man was you! Or he was a lady if you're a lady. And you forgot this ever happened.
I work at a gas station in rural Pennsylvania. It's a boring job, but it's pretty easy and it pays all right. Well, a few weeks ago, this new guy started. I'll call him Jeremy. Jeremy is weird. He's about 25 or 26, and he hardly speaks, but he's got the creepiest laugh I've ever heard. My boss and I have both noticed this, but it's never been a problem, so there's not much that we can do about it. Customers have never complained about him, and he's always done his job fairly well. Well, up until a few weeks ago, anyway. That's when things started going missing. Employee theft can be a problem in any business that sells consumer goods, and there's only one person working at a time at the gas station. It's a pretty small place. About 2 weeks ago, my boss started noticing that we were short on motor oil. At first, it was a few containers at a time, then entire shelves and boxes from the back room. Pretty soon, entire shipments would be gone the day after we got them, and it would always be right after Jeremy's shifts. My boss had checked the security camera tapes from every single night that he worked, but he could never catch him in the act. Jeremy would lock up at closing, then the motor oil would be gone the next day. My boss usually takes the tapes home with him to try and catch Jeremy stealing, but his daughter had a softball game last night, so he asked me to watch the tape for him. He offered to pay me overtime, under the table, so obviously I took the offer. There are 3 cameras, so he gave me 3 different tapes to check. I figured it'd be a long night, but I'm trying to save up for a vacation, so I really needed money. I took the tapes home, popped them into an old VCR, and sat back. 2 days ago, the last time he worked, Jeremy started at 4 p.m. Everything seemed pretty normal at first. He counted up his drawer, switched off with the girl who was working before him, and waited for a customer. The first person who came was Mrs. Templeton. The timestamp on the video was 4:03, a regular. She picked up her cigarettes and a newspaper, paid with a 20, nothing unusual there. The next customer was some local guy named Ron. He drives a motorcycle, usually comes in every few days. He filled up his tank, got a bag of beef jerky, paid with his credit card, then left. Next was some guy with a cowboy hat. I'd never seen him before, but we get plenty of strangers passing through, just like any other gas station. He got $40 worth of diesel fuel, paid with a $100 bill, and went on his way. I sat back and sighed. The only thing more boring than doing this job is watching someone else do it. My boss's offer was enough to keep me watching though, so I left the tape on. Everything seemed pretty normal. I had a feeling that if Jeremy was stealing motor oil, he knew we were suspicious of him by now. I didn't expect him to be dumb enough to let us catch him on camera. Things stayed boring and routine. Well, that is until about 5 o'clock. At 5:03, Mrs. Templeton came back in. I mean, she must have forgotten something. But she didn't. She bought the same pack of cigarettes as before. The same newspaper. She paid with another 20. That's odd. But then again, she's a little absent-minded. So. I thought Jeremy would have told her that she already got her smokes, but it's not against the rules to sell somebody the same thing twice. That's when Ron came in again. He bought another tank of gas for his motorcycle again. I later checked the outdoor camera because I thought maybe he had another car that he wanted to fill up. And, well, he bought the same pack of beef jerky. He paid with his credit card again. No big deal. I figured this was just a weird coincidence. Mrs. Templeton is forgetful, and Ron probably owns more than one Harley. And that's when the guy in the cowboy hat came back in. I felt a chill run down my spine. Don't get Diesel, don't get Diesel. I found myself whispering to myself in my empty living room, but he did. He got $40 worth of diesel fuel and paid with another $100 bill. Every move he made was identical to his first visit, right down to the way he scratched his nose before he walked out. Either this guy is rich, owns a lot of trucks, and just moved into town, or something really bizarre was happening. I kept watching. Every customer for the next hour was the same as before. Every single one. I was seriously freaked out, and then at 6:03, Mrs. Templeton walked back in. She bought her cigarettes and a newspaper again and paid with a 20 again. I thought I was going to lose it. I only watched another half hour before I started fast-forwarding through the rest. It was all the same. Every customer would come in at the exact same times, exactly 1 hour apart. Now I know what you're thinking. That sneaky motherfucker Jeremy had messed with the tapes. He had run a loop of his first hour of business over and over and over. But that wasn't the case. There are windows around the cash register area that the camera covers. And I watched the sun fade as time ran on. Jeremy's routine didn't loop over. He swept, mopped, restocked, and did all of his duties exactly how you would expect. But the same customers kept coming in. I was panicking at this point. Something was seriously wrong with what I was seeing, and I had no explanation for it. I skipped ahead to when he looked up and walked to his car. He hadn't stolen anything, but I kept watching, just to make sure. I fast-forwarded one last time to about midnight, at exactly 12:03, out of nowhere. Jeremy's face popped up on camera. I don't mean he moved his head into view. I mean, 1 second the store was empty, the next second his face was all I could see. He wasn't looking at the camera, he was looking at me. I was sure of it. I screamed and fumbled for the remote. By the time I grabbed it, he was gone. Just as soon as he left. One frame, he was there, the next he wasn't. My hands were shaking like crazy, but I popped in another tape. The other indoor camera showed the back area by the cash register, and I would be able to see how he got up to put his face in the camera like that. I skipped ahead to 12:03, but there was nothing. I would have been able to see him standing on a chair or something on that tape, but he wasn't there. I didn't see him enter the store at all after he left. It was like he wasn't really there. He doesn't know the security code, and no alarms were triggered that night after he locked up. What I did see, however, was that at 12:03, the motor oil vanished off the shelf. All of it. Same as Jeremy's face. 1 second it was there, the next it wasn't. I turned the tape off and went to bed, but I didn't get a wink of sleep. My body was exhausted right now, but my mind was racing. That tape was undoubtedly the creepiest, most disturbing thing I've ever seen in my life. We work in a few hours. My boss asked me to bring the tapes back in and let him know what I found, but really, what the hell am I going to say? Jeremy works the night shift tonight, directly after me, and the plan is for my boss to come in just before I leave and confront him with me, as I'm supposed to be the one who caught him stealing. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I suppose I'll have to show my boss the tapes, but I don't want to watch them with him. I never want to see anything like that again. I can't get the image of Jeremy just smiling directly into the camera out of my mind. It was the creepiest look I've ever seen on another human being's face. Anyway, I'm going to try again to get some last-minute sleep before I have to go in to deal with this. I'll let you guys know what happens. Update, 2:45 p.m. Updating from my phone. Apologies in advance for errors. My boss just finished watching the last of the tapes. I told him what to expect, but you really can't, prepare someone for something like that. He's scared shitless. I still am too. And Jeremy is due to come in at 4. We've got a little over an hour to get our shit together, but neither of us knows what to say to him. Is he just like a fucked up guy who likes to steal motor oil and scare the shit out of people, or is he something else? I don't know if this is crazy, but does anyone think that he could have anything to do with that time loop? My boss said that he never noticed anything like that in the other tapes, but the way he popped up in that one made me think that he knew I would be watching. It's like he wanted me to see what he could do, like he was showing off or something. The way he smiled into the camera was like a little kid showing you a sandcastle they built or something. I don't know. I probably sound crazy. I'm sure that I feel the part. I'm going to talk to my boss again some more. We have to calm ourselves down and figure out how to handle this. I'll update again tonight, but I really have this bad feeling about how this is going to play out. Update, 4:33 p.m. No signs of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update, 5:33 p.m. No signs of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update, 6:33 p.m. No signs of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update, 7:33 p.m. No signs of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update, 8:33 p.m. No signs of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update, 10:58 p.m. Holy shit. Holy shit. Holy shit. Holy shit. I just got home and I saw my previous updates. That things make less sense now than ever. Here's what I can tell you. I went to work. Jeremy never showed up. My boss and I decided to call the police, as you were well aware. When I picked up the phone to call, though, the sun went out. I shit you not, that's what I thought happened. Apparently, I blacked out for exactly 5 hours, because when I looked at the clock, it was 9:33. I think I got stuck in Jeremy's the time loop, and then I snapped out of it at the exact point that I blacked out. If that makes sense. But that's when things got really weird. My boss was right next to me when I blacked out, ready to corroborate my story to the cops. When I came to, the phone was in my hand, but it was dead. Not even a dial tone. My boss was still there, but he wasn't moving. He was standing up, but frozen. I looked at the clock again, and it wasn't moving. The second hand was stuck on the 12. It was exactly 9:33. Exactly. The clock on the register, the computer screen wasn't moving either. My phone was frozen. There was even a customer at the register waiting for my boss to get him cigarettes. I'm betting that would have been his 5th pack of the day. I got the fuck out of there. I didn't lock up. I didn't turn the lights out, and sorry guys, I didn't grab the security tapes to upload to the internet. Believe me, that was the last thing on my mind. The gas station is on a major highway. Cars were parked all along, except they weren't parked. They were frozen. The people inside were sitting still as wax statues. I got in my car and prayed that it would start. Thankfully it did. About halfway home, time started up again. The static from the radio turned into music like it was supposed to be. And from what I could tell by listening to the host in between songs, no one noticed the time freeze, or whatever it was. I was the only one. No, I'm sure Jeremy noticed as well. I still have no clue where he is or what he's doing. I'm hiding in my room and calling the police again in the morning. I don't know if I ever got through to them before. If I did, whether they took me seriously. I'm scared for my life at this point. I'll update tomorrow if I can. Final update, 10:33 a.m. I finally fell asleep around 4. I have no idea how I did it. I guess exhaustion finally got the best of me. This morning, I woke up to my phone ringing. It was my boss. He'd been calling me since 6. He woke up when time turned back on last night and immediately called the cops. They came by to see what was wrong and he told them everything. The police around here are all small-time guys. They were concerned more with the missing motor oil than anything, but my boss figured that he would take it as long as he could get their attention. They decided to go looking for Jeremy. We keep all our employees' applications on file, and since Jeremy just started working here, his was easy to find. They checked the address on it and headed over to his house. You're not going to believe what they found. The address Jeremy listed on his application was an empty lot. Or at least, now it is. There used to be a house there, but it burned down in 1993. Being a small town, almost everyone remembers that fire. A family of 4 used to live there way back when. Rumor has it that they had an estranged son, who they never really talked about. But I can't say for sure if that's true. What I can say is true is that after an insurance investigation, the fire was ruled as arson. The entire house was soaked in oil and torched with a Molotov cocktail. The entire family was sleeping when it happened. None of them survived. They never caught the guy who did it. Rumor has it that when they tried to contact the estranged son, no one could find him. Anyway, my boss called me and told me this, and I freaked out. Then he asked me to come to the gas station. "What are you, crazy?" I said, but he assured me that the cops were there with him. Then he dropped the bomb. The FBI were also in town and they were going to talk to me one way or another, so I might as well come in. It was about 7:15 and I wanted to go back to bed, but I figured I wouldn't be able to sleep much more anyway, so I went down. 4 men in suits greeted me and told me to have a seat. We went over everything 2 or 3 times until we finally got all the details down. I told them about Jeremy, the security tapes, last night at work, everything. Finally, after I finished, one of the agents said, "Oh Christ, we've got another one on our hands." And they made me sign a bunch of papers saying I wouldn't tell anyone about what happened, so I can't say much more. I might be breaking the law just by posting this. So now, I'm home. I'm not sure what to do with myself. That agent's words when I told him the stories are going to haunt me for the rest of my life, and... Anyway, I gotta go. I have errands to run today, then I have to go into work to pick up some tapes. My boss thinks this new guy, Jeremy, he's a complete creep, is stealing motor oil, and I have to watch the security footage to see if I can catch him doing it. I have better things to do, but my boss is paying me overtime under the table, so... I'm trying to save up for a vacation so I can really use the money. It should be pretty simple. The oil always goes missing right after his shifts. I figure I'll just watch the tapes, catch him in the act. That'll be that.
As you may know, the popular show Ed, and Eddy had been running for a long time. However, between October 7th, 2003 and October 21st, 2003, episode 34 was accidentally released 1 week before it was scheduled to. It was also known to some around the office the primary writer had been sick with the flu, and instead of going on to make episode 34, the show was supposedly to replay episode 1. At 5 a.m. Eastern, people reported a very disturbing new episode premiering on Cartoon Network. Some children were unfortunate enough to see it. Apparently, the quality of the episode was mediocre when held to the regular standards. Animation was choppy, sound was constricted and very muffled. Reports of a line running up and down, similar to a crappy VHS tape, were received. Scenery was described as overwhelmingly dark and depressing without changing props, and other background objects stormy looking. Characters also behaved oddly.
Instead of the normal goofy hijinks-inspired personalities, viewers complained that they seemed extremely agitated, gratuitously hateful towards each other, and constantly about to begin sobbing after the lines. The protagonist also had a very bad lisp. No one knows why, but he spoke with a sexual tone, and that further bothered the viewers. I was one of these viewers. The episode began with Eddy walking down the street with Ed. I noted that Double D was missing. There was an angular shot coming from in front of the two to show them walking towards the viewer. Eddy was wearing the angry look that he does when something goes wrong. His eyes were red around the iris. Ed looked absolutely forlorn and practically dragged behind Eddy, tears in his eyes, which were both lazy and looking in opposite outward directions. Kevin, the series antagonist, was riding his bike opposite the Eds towards them. The shot became blurry, and low moans were heard coming from Eddy before Kevin hit him, which never happened because the screen went black. The screen then snapped back to Kevin and was again headed towards Eddy. The view was so blurry this time, all I saw was a green blob headed towards a yellow one. Again, the low moan, only this time it sounded like the microphone was broken and low static came, greatly overshadowing the moan. A claymation sequence of Double D sleeping in Eddy's bed came up. Honestly, it may have just been the abruptness, but I jumped and shivered. Waking and getting up out of bed, he moved oddly around the circular room, a fast pitter-patter of footsteps being the only audio. The steps' sound were very clear, as I was shown a bird's-eye view of him scampering around the room. There were no visible doors. Double D began screeching, sounded like a fisher cat, as he moved wildly around the cell of a room, faster and faster until the screen began blurring again, the purple room's color swallowing a now orange blur. An extreme close-up of Eddy's front door sat in absolute silence for a maddening long time, at least 2 minutes of dead silence in a door. Next we see Jimmy and Sarah at a doctor of some sort, probably oral. Jimmy, obstructed in view by a hanging lamp, is crying loudly with Sarah trying to comfort him in an unusually warm fashion. "It hurts, Sarah. It hurts." Suddenly, the door of the room is smashed open by a new character, a dentist. His face wasn't shown because he was tall enough to be out of the shot. Sarah was escorted out of the room. Jimmy was shown. His headgear was mangled. The front was bent upward, stretching his lip very high-tearing proportions. The front of his gums were trickling blood and teeth were missing. The disturbing part was that he had lost both arms and legs beforehand, apparently, and sat a paraplegic. I almost cried as I came to the conclusion the others had beaten him up and bent his headgear. The camera stayed on his mangled face for a few seconds, still as a picture, silent as ever. Commercials came on. We were instantly assaulted by a very hairy Rolf in his darkened shed, fisting the cow repeatedly. The visual loops and gets blurry again as the scene pans out. Naz is reading a magazine on her couch. The quality is now perfect. Eddy is now alone without Ed. The door is shown again, and we see through Eddy's eyes as he reaches out and opens it. His house is nice and bright, but a very badly played violin is blaring, the only audio in the scene, as he makes his way through the house. Eddy opens the door to his room. Johnny is shown under Naz's couch cushions as he crawls out on all fours in a comedic way and pops up behind her, still oblivious. I laughed because someone forgot to dry his eyes and I thought of a mole. Suddenly I stopped laughing as he started swallowing her head, still in a cartoonish fashion of course, but it was different. He and she stayed like this until she started kicking and struggling, and Johnny held her like this until she went limp. The zoom in on his face revealed extremely small, human eyes. Double D was laying on Eddy's floor. No longer in claymation. The camera showed Eddy's house for the remainder of the episode, about 3 minutes. And the next program began on the spot. I was an intern at Nickelodeon Studios for a year in 2005 for my degree in animation. It wasn't paid, of course, most internships aren't, but it did have some perks beyond education. To adults, it may not seem like a big one, but to most kids, at the time, they would shit themselves over it. Now, since I worked directly with the editors and animators, I got to view the new episodes days before they aired. I'll get right to it, without giving too much unnecessary details. They had very recently made the SpongeBob movie, and the entire staff was somewhat sapped of creativity, so it took them longer to start up the next season. But the delay lasted longer for more upsetting reasons. There was a problem with the Series 4 premiere that set everyone and everything back for several months. Me and 2 other interns were in the editing room, along with the lead animators and sound editors for the final cut. We received the copy that was supposed to be Fear of a Krabby Patty, and gathered around the screen to watch. Now, given that this isn't a final cut yet, animators often put up mock title cards, sort of an inside joke for us, with phony, often lewd titles, such as How Sex Doesn't Work, instead of Rockabye Bivalve, which, when SpongeBob and Patrick adopt a sea scallop. Nothing particularly funny, but work-related chuckles, so when we saw the title card, Squidward's Suicide, we didn't think it more than a morbid joke. One of the interns did a small throat laugh at it. The happy-go-lucky music starts as normal. The story begins with Squidward practicing his clarinet, hitting a few sour notes like normal. We hear SpongeBob laughing outside, and Squidward stops, yelling at him to keep it down, as he has a concert that night and needs to practice. SpongeBob says okay, goes to see Sandy with Patrick. The bubble splash screen comes up, and we see the ending of Squidward's concert. This is when things begin to seem off. While playing, a few frames repeat themselves, but the sound doesn't. At this point, sound is synced up with animation, so yeah, that's not common. But when he stops playing, the sound finishes as if the skip never happened. There is slight murmuring in the crowd before they begin to boo him. Now, not normal cartoon booing that's common in the show, but you could very clearly hear malice in it. Squidward's in full frame and looks visibly afraid. The shot goes to the crowd, with SpongeBob in center frame, and he too is booing, very much unlike him. This isn't the oddest thing, though. What's odd is everyone had these hyper-realistic eyes. Very detailed. Clearly not shots of real people's eyes, but something a bit more real than CGI. The pupils were red. Some of us looked at each other, obviously confused, but since we weren't the writers, we didn't question its appeal to children yet. The shot goes to Squidward sitting on the edge of his bed, looking very forlorn. The view out of his porthole window is of a night sky, so it isn't very long after the concert. The unsettling part is at this point, there's no sound. Literally, no sound. Not even the feedback from the speakers in the room. It's as if the speakers were turned off, though their status showed them working perfectly. He just sat there, blinking, in this silence for about 30 seconds. Then he started to sob softly. He put his hands and tentacles over his eyes and cried quietly for a full minute. All the while, a sound in the background very slowly growing from nothing to barely audible. It sounded like a slight breeze through a forest. The screen slowly begins to zoom in on his face. And by slow, I mean it's only noticeable if you look at a shot 10 seconds apart side by side. His sobbing gets louder, more full of hurt and anger. The screen then twitches a bit as if it twists in on itself for a split second, then goes back to normal. The wind through the trees sound gets slowly louder and more severe, as if a storm is brewing somewhere. The eerie part is, this sound and Squidward's sobbing sounded real. As if the sound wasn't coming from the speakers, but as if the speakers were holes the sound was coming through from the other side. As good as the studio likes to have, they don't purchase the equipment to be that good to produce sound of that quality. Below the sound of the wind and the sobbing, very faint, something sounded like laughing. It came at odd intervals and never lasted more than a second, but you had a hard time pinning it. We watched the show twice, so pardon me if things sound too specific, but I've had time to think about them. After 30 seconds of this, the screen blurred and twitched violently, and something flashed over the screen as if a single frame was replaced. The lead animation editor paused and rewound frame by frame. What we saw was... it was a still photo of a dead child. He couldn't have been more than 6. The face was mangled and bloodied. One eye dangled over his upturned face. Popped. He was naked down to his underwear, his stomach crudely cut open and his entrails laid beside him. He was laying on some pavement that was probably a road. The most upsetting part was that there was a shadow of the photographer. There's no crime tape, no evidence tags or markers, and the angle was completely off for a shot designed to be evidence. It would seem like the photographer was the person responsible for the child's death. We were, of course, mortified, but pressed on, hoping that it was just a sick joke. The screen flipped back to Squidward, still sobbing, louder than before, and half body in frame. There was now what appeared to be blood running down his face from his eyes. The blood was also done in a hyper-realistic style, as if you touched it, you'd get blood on your fingers. The window sounded now as if there was a gale blowing through the forest. There was even snapping sounds of branches. The laughing, a deep baritone, lasted at longer intervals and coming more frequently. After about 20 seconds, the screen again twisted and showed a single frame photo. The editor was reluctant to go back. We all were. But he knew that he had to. This time the photo was that of what appeared to be a little girl no older than the first child. She was laying on her stomach, her barrettes in a pool of blood next to her. Her left eye was, too, popped out and popped. Naked except for underpants. Her entrails were pulled on top of her, above another crude cut along her back. Again, the body was on the street and photographer's shadow was visible, very similar in size and shape to the first. I had to choke back vomit. And one intern, the only female in the room, ran out. The show resumed. About 5 seconds after the second photo displayed, Squidward went silent, as did all sound, like it was when the scene started. He put his tentacles down. His eyes were now done in hyperrealism like the others in the beginning of this episode. They were bleeding, bloodshot, and pulsating. He just stared at the screen as if watching the viewer. After about 10 seconds, he started sobbing, this time not covering his eyes. The sound was piercing and loud, and most fear-inducing of all is his sobbing was mixed with screams. Tears and blood were dripping down his face at a heavy rate. The wind sound came back, and so did the deep, voiced laughing, and this time, the still photo lasted for a good 5 frames. The animator was able to stop it on the 4th and backed up. This time the photo was of a boy about the same age, but this time the scene was different. The entrails were just being pulled out of a stomach by a large hand. The right eye popped and dangling, blood trickling down it. The animator proceeded. It was hard to believe, but the next one was different. We couldn't tell what. He went on to the next. Same thing. He went back to the first and played them quicker. And I lost it. I vomited on the floor, the animation and sound editors gasping at the screen. The 5 frames were not as if they were 5 different photos. They were played out as if they were frames from a video. We saw the hand slowly lifting out the guts. We saw the kid's eye focus on it. We even saw 2 frames of the kid beginning to blink. The lead sound editor told us to stop. He had to call the creator to see this. Mr. Hillenberg arrived, and within 15 minutes he was confused as to why he was called down there, so the editor just continued the episode. Once the few frames were shown, all screaming, all sound again stopped. Full frame of the face for about 3 seconds. The shot quickly panned out, and that deep voice said, "Do it." And we see in Squidward's hands a shotgun. He immediately put the gun in his mouth and pulled the trigger. Realistic blood and brain matter splattered on the wall behind him in his bed, and he flies back with the force. The last 5 seconds of this episode show his body on the bed, on his side, one eye dangling on what's left of his head above the floor, staring blankly at it. Then the episode ends. Mr. Hillenberg is obviously angry at this. He demanded to know what the hell was going on, and most people left the room at this point, so it was just a handful of us to watch it again. Viewing the episode twice only served to imprint the entirety of it on my mind and caused me horrible nightmares. I'm sorry I stayed. The only theory we could think of was the file was edited by someone on the chain from the drawing studio to here. The CTO was called to analyze what happened. The analysis of the file did show that it was edited over by new material. However, the timestamp of it was a mere 24 seconds before we began viewing it. All equipment involved was scanned for foreign software and hardware, as well as glitches, as if the timestamp may have been glitched and showed the wrong time, but everything checked out fine. We don't know what happened, and to this day, nobody does. There was an investigation due to the nature of the photos, but nothing came of it. No child scene was identified, no clues were gathered from the data involved, nor physical clues in the photos. I never believed in unexplainable phenomena before, but now that I have something happen and can't prove anything about it beyond anecdotal evidence, I think twice about things. We've all been there. You've just gone to a certain place at a certain time on a certain date, done a special thing, and the thing you suspected would happen has just fucking happened. Not to mention the fact that you've just seen whatever the fuck is living in your mirror, been told in detail how you're going to die, and the highly demonic and invincible thing you summoned is headed towards you. Also, your family is all dead. Your friends are all missing, and you're being framed by someone who has access to your bedroom. What the fuck do you do now, sweet protagonist? Well, you've come to the right place to find out. These are the simple rules one must follow in order to firstly not become the victim of CreepyPasta, and furthermore, to come out kicking if the worst does happen. With the help of this simple guide, you too can be the catatonic, traumatized wreck, as opposed to the guy being currently worn as a coat by some dude who roams a lot. Just keep these simple rules in mind. Rule number 1, mirrors and darkness don't mix. Rule number 2, actually mirrors are a general no. In the creepypasta world, there is nothing more sinister. Rule number 3, there is 0 chance of survival if you look at the thing that no one else can see or answer its question incorrectly. Rule number 4, if you are alone at night in a creepy mental institution, take some time to consider what the fuck you're doing there. Then, if it's appropriate to do so, leave. Rule number 5. Avoid going to places where everyone who has went there never came back or died inexplicably. Rule number 6. If someone stops your vehicle at night and asks you to come with them, it would probably be in your best interest to politely decline. Rule number 7. Killing is the last method of survival. Use it sparingly, but without fear. Rule number 8. Who was phone? Is always a good thing to ponder. Also, who the hell answers a phone while kissing a dead person's sexy daughter? A douche. That's who. Rule number 9. Get a simple .38 revolver. Load it with 2 silver bullets. If you really feel there's no chance to come out alive of a situation, take one shot at whatever's threatening you. If it doesn't work, you still have one shot to become an hero with. Rule number 10. Area 51 is simply too well guarded to let you in, or to let an alien out. Rule number 11. When going to a hotel, try to steer clear of unauthorized areas. If you can't resist but you saw a red thing, take some time to consider the price range and hotel standards on your next visit. Have you ever stayed at a haunted Hilton? Rule number 12. When booking your hotel stay, TripAdvisor can be an invaluable tool in deeming whether or not your choice is the scene of a multiple murder, full of dead people, built on the mouth of hell. And local newspapers can also be helpful. Rule number 13. Invoking demons, speaking weird languages, and performing rituals of any kind is considered dangerous. Refrain from doing that, especially around abandoned warehouses, churches, psychiatric institutions, forests, and mirrors. Rule number 14. When going to a new area, environmental understanding is key to survival. Ask around for cursed places, legends, dangers, and other details. Listen to the local advice, and don't be afraid to ask if you're unsure of which attacks or disappearances are paranormal and which aren't. Rule number 15. Always have a Bible next to your bed. Provides average reading material, proof of beliefs, and a really heavy object to throw at enemies. Rule number 16. Don't count on holy water. Get a sturdy vial of sulfuric acid and have a priest consecrate it. Rule number 17. Japanese priests cleanse rooms by waving katana swords around. This ritual is also 100% effective on corporeal forms. Rule number 18. If you find 666 messages on your phone, mailbox, email, etc., consider changing the said service provider. Also, don't bother listening or reading the messages. It's spam. Extra dimensional? Possibly, but spam nonetheless. Rule number 19. Old pharmaceutical companies can't help you, unless you specifically need blood of the innocent, snake oil, and radioactive syrup, which is never. Rule number 20. If you need to sign it in blood, you don't need to sign it. All mainstream governing bodies will accept contracts signed in ink. Bear this in mind if offered deals that seem too good to be true. Rule number 21. Lighthouses are dangerous. Avoid them at all costs. If you work at a lighthouse, consider a career in insurance sales or veterinary care. Rule number 22. There is simply no reason to listen to music that causes suicidal tendencies, or to watch films that have had strange, disastrous consequences. Rule number 23. If you like to plan ahead and have some money, buy your auntie and uncle a house in Bel Air. Nothing can harm you there, no matter how scared your mother is. Rule number 24. Scared, secluded, untouched places and old buildings are left untouched for a reason. Pioneers never say die, but they have an unusually high mortality rate. Rule number 25. Before you start swimming in the ice-cold waters of a murky lake at the center of a dark forest at midnight, ask yourself if you really want to travel to an ancient and terrifying city. If the answer is no, then stay at home and watch whatever quality programming is available on Cinemax. Rule number 26. On your 33rd birthday, try celebrating in a well-lit house in the company of others. Rule number 27. Refrain from using the one true name for anything. There's probably a reason people gave it a nick. Rule number 28. Watching TV static for long periods may be hazardous to your health. Try satellite TV to combat this problem. Rule number 29. Get a cat. Those furry little hairballs seem to perceive unnatural phenomena better than us, and if desperate, simply throw it at whatever is about to get you. Rule number 30. Cemeteries are bad places, especially in foggy conditions and on Halloween. Rule number 31. Try not to close your eyes. Ever. If you must do so only briefly. Rule number 32. If you hear chanting, run until you are out of earshot. Rule number 33. If you're too old to play with dolls, you don't need to be anywhere near one of those creepy little fuckers. Rule number 34. Legends can offer valuable insight on where not to go camping with friends. Rule number 35. When babysitting, ascertain the family's tastes and preferences to avoid being killed by poorly selected statues. Rule number 36. Even if you are certain that running will not save you, it is always best to try. Rule number 37. Even if the legend you read that convinced you to do whatever satanic ritual you did to summon the demon which is about to fuck your ass states that they cannot be killed by bullets, take note that they can still likely be wounded. A broken leg is not a figure of speech. It is a fucking leg that is broken. Unless said demon has multiple legs, then you probably are fucked. Rule number 38. Before you pray to Satan to destroy your soul, you may want to stop and consider whether summoning a demon and getting absolutely nothing in return at the cost of your soul is a good idea. Rule number 39. Think twice before going with your friends on a camping trip to a forest where a mysterious creature is said to reside. A polite, "thanks but no," will suffice. Rule number 40. Buy a dog. They will defend you to the end, or at least until whatever horrific being you just summoned with the tears of 1,000 orphans eats it and shits out its reanimated skeleton called Gozer the Gozerian. Rule number 41. Before going into a mysterious cave with little space and finding mysterious ruins in white, stop. Ask yourself whether or not it's actually worth it. Then turn and get your ass out as fast as the situation warrants before a deathly creature tries to grab your leg. Rule number 42. If you survive, which is unlikely, make sure you become well known as the insane person who some poor sap will hear about. They will eventually talk to you so you can tell them how to perform a satanic ritual to summon a demonic being. After this, you must immediately stop imitating an insane person so that when they come back with their soul in 666 pieces to rage at you for doing this, your house will be for sale. Rule number 43. Never ever accept a game cartridge that you played as a child if it's missing a label, or is old, shabby, or has its name written on it in marker, no matter how nostalgic you are. It's a trap. Follow these simple rules, and little or massive harm may befall you. Either way, the important thing is to make sure your tale is told, copied, and pasted repeatedly.